As bold as lions. As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
You're listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the As Bold as Lions podcast. Great to have you on board today and joining me for the next few minutes. Excited about this podcast today. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but we're just moving right through this month, December rolling along, a couple more episodes for the month and for the year, this week and next week, then just hitting a quick pause for basically the weeks of Christmas and New Year's. Thought behind that is just Christmas is on a Monday and New Year's is on a Monday. These posts on Mondays, not that, it wouldn't be something else to fill your week with beyond those days, but taking a little break for myself, for family, and encourage you to do that too, I guess, with your family, with your life around these holidays. Not that I would say don't listen to the podcast. Don't, just take a break for a while. Like, sure, I love it if you listen to it. And there's other things that maybe you can go back to and find over these next couple of weeks. All that to say, just going to hit the ground running in 2024. Still trying to kind of get a plan for where we start the year off and kind of some things into the next year of direction of topics and so forth. But that just reminds me that we've taken a lot of different paths this year, and hopefully through all of that, God's has said something through this and used this for His good and for His glory. It is crazy to think that the year is almost over. I've always just marvel at that when a year has come to a close, and you kind of take in and assess all the things that have happened, personally, on more of a national or global scale, all those things. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it. But the year starts out with a lot of promise, and as you start a new year, you look at that, and then before you know it, it's like, well, that's done. It's on to the next one. And I guess that kind of rhythm of life is just something that definitely defines us and is a good thing. Anyway, years define us. Age is reflected in terms of years, and then what a person has kind of lived through depends on their age and those milestone moments. I can think of two defining moments in my life in terms of on more of a larger scale, living through 9/11 and living now through COVID. 2001 and 2020, those 2 years, big defining years, big moments in terms of what happened. For you listening, depending on your age, you may go back further. You may say, well, all the way back to like Pearl Harbor, which we were not celebrating, but remembering in the month of December. That's a milestone moment, kind of a very sad thing, but start of World War II for the U.S. Things like the Vietnam War, things like the JFK assassination, things that really have an impact on us culturally. Oof. And we can kind of all go back and say, what were you doing when such and such happened? You can do that with most of those things. COVID's kind of hard because I can kind of remember when it started, but then it just kind of dragged on and went on, and that was just a whole host of things that I don't think any of us really want to go back to. Anyway, we can think of those things, and we can think of the individual things that we live through or that we experience. Marriage, having a family. For myself, those are two big ones. And just kind of entering into ministry and doing ministry throughout the years. There's several things that are attached to that for myself, defining moments. So as you listen to this, maybe some things come to your mind that you're like, as I'm such and such age, these are some things that I can go back to. And through that, you can see the Lord's faithfulness as well, hopefully through what you've experienced, highs and lows, kind of the meandering path that we take. Like, how can you see the common thread through that of being God's faithfulness to you and his goodness to you? Well, as I thought about all of this, kind of having this nostalgic kind of moment and thinking about podcast episodes, finishing up December, Christmas theme sort of things, I was brought to this movie that I love, which you see the title of the podcast. It's a Wonderful Life. Really is a wonderful life. It is a wonderful life in terms of kind of applying that. And just digging into that a little bit today, quite a bit actually. Full disclosure, if we're talking Christmas movies, all right, you cannot top this one. You cannot top It's a Wonderful Life. I'm just going to say that. It's a classic. It's not only the best Christmas movie, it's one of the best movies, period. Okay. You're entitled to your opinion. That's fine, but you won't change my mind on this matter. And I really, if you haven't seen it, for maybe the small percentage of people that are listening to this that have no idea what It's a Wonderful Life is about, you need to rent it, you need to stream it, you need to find it, however you can get it. Usually, I'm on Amazon Prime, and I think it's always free every year, at least around this time of year, to watch it. But you could search and look for it. It's one of my like must watch. It's almost like this tradition now on Christmas. The last few years, whoever wants to, it may not be my whole family, because some of them don't get as geared up for this as I do, but my wife and I at least will sit down and watch the whole thing from start to finish. And we've done that like actually on Christmas Day. Like, just we're done with the presents. Everybody's kind of just having the afternoon to unwind or whatever. And we'll pop this in and start watching it. You can get the original, the black and white, kind of the purest sort of form of it that people would say, or there's the colorized that they came out with. I think, again, Amazon may have both. I was in a thrift store recently and saw the DVD for the black and white version, and I'm like, I got to pick that up. So I don't know what we may watch on Christmas Day, other than to say we will watch this one. And there's other great Christmas movies. I get it. A Christmas Story is great. Some people really love Elf. Some people love The Polar Express, Home Alone. And those are, there's an element of like, humor in all of those, I'd say. But this movie has not so much the humor, but the depth. And I know there's some cheesiness to it, but it has some really good truth in it. So just kind of jumping into the movie, there will be some spoiler alerts in this if you're not super familiar with it or you haven't seen it at all. But that shouldn't really keep you from hopefully wanting to see it and completely ruining it for you. I don't want to do that. But if you know the movie, some of the main characters. You've got the main star, who is played by Jimmy Stewart, and his name is George Bailey. The movie centers on his life. He's kind of, everything revolves around what he's going through. And really, at every turn, George's poor life just seems to be like he can't get a break in order to just sort of go after what he dreams of his life to be. He just wants to pursue happiness, fulfillment in going, seeing the world, getting out of, he's always grown up and known this kind of sleepy little town. It's called Bedford Falls. I think it's a fictional town, but Bedford Falls, New York, I believe. And, it's got the main street and the drugstore that he grows up and works in, and the high school, and his family just always live there. But he dreams of just going off and seeing the world, experiencing a lot of different things. He's kind of in that young adult, moving out of his teen years into the 20s, I would say, kind of in that stage of life. And he's not ready to settle down. The girls, the women, all that can kind of wait. He's not ready to just focus on that. He wants to just have some more, I guess, just things that are beyond that stage where you're tied down to marriage and family. Not saying tied down is a bad thing, but have those years of freedom still. The problem is for George is that life happens, stuff happens. His father dies, and then the family business is in jeopardy. They own a savings and loan bank, kind of in the 1920s, 1930s, that time frame. And so with his father passing, if George doesn't step in and take over the business and kind of keep this thing going, then that business will die. And not only that, there's only one other player in town who kind of is competition, but just an evil guy that will then just kind of swoop in and monopolize things. And his name is Mr. Potter. He's kind of this evil character that every time he's in the room, you know he's like the villain. He's the sinister kind of guy. And so if George doesn't step up and take over the bank, take his father's position, Potter's going to come in and just run the town into the ground and kind of just raise prices, raise rent, raise all these things, rates, in just his attempt to make more money, because he's just a greedy guy, this Mr. Potter. So the beauty of this movie, with all this kind of just setting the stage there, as you see George's life unfold, as you see George Bailey go through these things, you realize that, despite the disappointments, the setbacks, the things he didn't get to do, because he has to kind of grow up and just step into these roles, because he realizes like, wow, I'm not going to be able to go and do all these things. I've got to stay here. Despite all of that, he has some really good things that happen. He really has a great life. It's not like, he had to just trade all this and then just stay put and nothing good then happens for him. Like, he then settles down, and this romance and this courtship with Mary, who is kind of the other, I'd say, real central character. Mary becomes his wife, and she's really like his saving grace. Like, for the faults and the things that George doesn't possess, Mary is like totally his better half. And you see this throughout the movie, and you're really rooting for George, but Mary just as much, and the two of them to just like to make it in their marriage and their family. And just as a side note, like Mary, I did this whole series on raising the standard kind of towards men, towards younger men, and then more established career family men, and the retired elderly man, episodes for each one. But for you guys that are looking for the right type of woman, man, you watch this movie and you see Mary and you see the character of somebody like that. And not saying like projecting like this is a Christian gal or anything, but looking for a Christian gal that has those kind of things. That's the type of woman that I think we need to be after. Just a side note. So other things, George has a wife, he has a family, he's got a nice house. It's kind of this fixer upper, but Mary again sees the vision of this old house and they get it and they're making it their home. And he's having success running the bank. They go through, there's this one scene where there's a run on the bank and the people are coming to like pull all their money out. And George weathers that. I think this is preceding or right around the stock market crash. So historically, there's these things that are happening that reflect what actually took place during this time. But George weathers that. He helps lead the bank through that time. He keeps the bank open, keeps it from closing and having to, again, shuffle all this stuff over to Potter and see him come in and take over. And he has this good name in the community. People like George Bailey. They know him. That last name carries a lot of weight with it as well. So things are looking up for him, despite the fact that he's not been able to ever go down this path that he originally thought, like, hey, I'm going to go this way in life. So all that backstory, we get all of that, the narration of this is kind of showing us George's life up to this point. And then it kind of brings us into present day where there's this critical, crucial moment that happens, which then the fallout from that is like the last maybe half an hour, 45 minutes of the film. And so if you've seen the movie, you remember what kind of happens as a result of this. The family business, the bank is in jeopardy because George's uncle, who is partner in with the bank, with the savings and loan, the name of his name escapes me, but it would have been his father's brother, I believe. Anyway, he misplaces this big deposit. It's like a daily bank deposit, but it's an amount of money. It's a sum that, like, without having that, it's crucial for the bank for their operation. So this is all leading up to Christmas. This is like right before Christmas Day. And there's a bank examiner coming. There's just kind of all this whirlwind of stuff that's going on. George's brother is a war hero and he's coming home. I think he was like a fighter pilot, just all kinds of stuff. But then this thing happens and it just kind of like the bottom just falls out of George's life because he's like, wow, I've now got to figure out how to navigate this. And there's really nothing in his past that can help him through this because this is such a bad thing. This for him, he's just like, he immediately shatters. He's been through some tough times, but he knows, like, man, if this doesn't, somebody's going to go to jail for this. Somebody's going to, have to answer for losing all this money. And besides that, Mr. Potter, he kind of knows what's happened. If you've seen the movie, he knows the secret about this money and what happened. And so he's all too keen to see the whole thing collapse for George, to fail and for the bank to dissolve. So at this point in It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is at the end of his rope. Take all the good things, take all the stuff that's happened with his wife, his family, his standing in the community. He's basically like put all that on the scale, and then this huge catastrophe, and it just outweighs everything. And he comes to the point where he's like, man, I'm just going to end it all. He's just like immediately thrown into this tailspin of depression and just like, this is it. And, kind of that I'm worth more dead than alive kind of a thing where he's ready to just take that drastic step. And so there's this bridge that runs into town, and he's going over to that to jump off into the frigid waters. Just kind of ended all that way. And this is a point at which Clarence steps in, probably the other third or fourth major character in the movie. And Clarence has been kind of the observer of George's life throughout this whole thing. The narration is taking place between, I think it's another angel and Clarence, watching George's life. And then, hey, Clarence, this is the moment which you need to intervene and help George because he's about to do something that, is very bad. And so Clarence, the guardian angel, he steps in and he sees George going to get ready to jump into the water. He appears and jumps in first. So then he does that out of a assumption that George will then jump in to save him because Clarence is going to drown in the water, in the icy, frigid waters if George doesn't. And it's at this point that Clarence gives George a unique opportunity. There's kind of a conversation of who Clarence is and all this stuff. And George is kind of like confused by the whole thing. But, George is convinced still, like, I shouldn't be here. There's no, this whole thing is messed up and, basically that says something to the effect of like, I'm worth more dead than alive, or I'm better off dead. And Clarence says, hey, why don't we see what that would look like? And without actually ending his life, George is then able to see the impact of his life, of the life he lived, and the holes that would have been left if he had never been born. And that's kind of the whole premise of the movie. It's a Wonderful Life. And we just step back from that and think about, wow, think about that in terms of any of us. Like if you didn't exist, who else would be impacted? What else would have happened because you weren't there? And this is kind of the most powerful part of the movie to me, because Clarence then starts showing George all these things that occurred because he wasn't there. At a young age, his little brother would have died because they went sledding. There was some ice, but George pulled his brother from the water when that ice broke and he broke through. George was there to get him out. So his little brother, he takes him to his brother's tombstone and it's like, he didn't make it because you weren't there to save him. His wife, Mary, they would have never gotten married. She becomes kind of this old spinster type woman who works at the library, and she just, she never married anybody. And the real like wow moment is like Bedford Falls becomes what's known as Pottersville because George isn't there to save the bank. And all this stuff just kind of cascades down of like, you weren't there to do this, so then this person could do that. And it's just a series of events. And Clarence shows them all this stuff. Like, what an opportunity to see what life would be like if you weren't around. And it just, we think about that and we're like, wow, all that just because this one person wasn't here. It's like, yeah, all of that. And so this movie, I think, trying to make a spiritual application on this, and it's not overtly spiritual at all, but there's things that I think we can pull from it. It should really make us consider the weight and impact of our own lives in Christ, in the Lord. knowing that in him we have meaning, we have purpose. And there's an impact, either good or bad, that we can leave upon those around us. And it really is a wonderful life if we're living it for the Lord. And so that's kind of the cliffhanger I want to leave it at, if you haven't seen the movie, because at this point you're probably wondering, like, how does George then get it all back? Because he's been taken out of the picture. He's basically seen what his life, what life would look like without him. And I'll leave it there to just kind of intrigue you if you haven't seen it, or maybe you haven't seen it in a while, to go back and see, like, how then does this all kind of come full circle and resolve. But I do want to leave you with a few takeaways that I think spiritually we can have from this movie. Again, it's not a movie that claims to be a Christian movie. There can be a little bit of loose theology here. The whole concept of Clarence and just everything that they write into this can be a stretch for us. So I'm not saying any of that is necessarily absolutely biblical. But I think there are some things that we can just take as we kind of close here today, and just some points that I have for us. First thing is this: when one thing goes wrong, we can think that everything then is bad. When there's a catastrophic financial event at the bank, George is led to then this extreme position. I'm better off not being here. And he might rightfully be concerned about everything, but his actions in response to this would have detrimental effects. And it's just a consideration for us. Do we consider the full weight of the choices that we make? Proverbs 19 verse 2 states, "Desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way." We can't be hasty in decisions. We have to weigh things before the Lord and get wisdom. Another point I have is there's a bigger perspective we need to have. Proverbs 18:15, "An intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge." Is George wrong to have his dreams, his desires, these things that he wanted to pursue? No, certainly not. And does God withhold from us good things? I don't think so. But within all of that, within life, his ways are higher than ours. His plans are higher than ours and what we can see or imagine. And George, if he wanted to, he could have been mad at God. We can get mad at God too when it's like, man, this is what I really hoped and dreamed for, and this isn't happening. But can we step back from that and say, what is God trying to teach me through these events? What is he trying to tell me here? Are we willing to listen and then allow him to guide our steps and order our steps? There's a bigger perspective that we need to be after. And along those lines, another point, God is in control. His plans are for good and not for harm. Similar to understanding that bigger perspective, we need to see that God's plans are ultimately for his glory and for our good. May not always seem that way at the time. If George was a believer, how would he have seen that God just didn't have it out for him? Like, God wasn't just trying to ruin his day. He wasn't. But if you could see that, perhaps he wouldn't have been so inclined to say, I'm going to do this drastic step. I'm going to take my own life here. Jeremiah 29:11 is a great verse, ties into this. It's a verse to take within context of the whole chapter, but it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a hope, a future and a hope." See, God's plans are for good, but we do have to surrender our will to his. Final thing I have today, in terms of It's a Wonderful Life takeaways, the impact of our lives in Christ cannot be underestimated. Philippians 4 verse 5, "Let your reasonableness be known to everyone." George couldn't see the impact of his life until his life was taken away. It had profound ripple effects. And now take that same example and consider the impact or the lack thereof of our lives in Christ. Is there a noticeable void if you were never alive? Of course, there should be. Will there be people who didn't hear about Christ because you weren't there to tell them? Yes. Would it affect the faith of your family and your loved ones? Certainly. We must consider such things because we'll never know just how much our belief in Jesus will have an impact. And just to kind of make that spiritual application of George Bailey, knowing like you weren't here, you like with his brother, you weren't here to save that person. I've said it before, we don't do the saving in Christ, but if you weren't here and you didn't preach the message, who else would have to lead that person to Christ, to show them Christ? That's some weighty stuff, but I think it's worth considering. So as we wrap up this movie review / Bible study, I'm compelled to think about the impact we have even more at Christmas. That it's something I think about even more as we come into this time. It's a time when it's easy to just get busy and kind of look inward and self-examine and what's on my wish list and all these things that I want. Are we able to look outward? Are we able to resist that urge? To see the hurting around us, to consider the impact of time and our words and our talents. And if there was a void left by our absence, how are we making sure to stay present and be vigilant for those conversations that we need to have? Guys, your life, my life, it's important. It has value. It has meaning. We have work to do in the kingdom. And I hope that you'll stick around because next time there's going to be kind of an episode putting a bow on kind of a pun intended, putting a bow on Christmas, on the new year, end of the year, looking at the new year, trying to kind of cram all that into one, but still pointing us in this direction. We'll be going a little further in all this concept, but just driving home the point. We have such a short window of time on the earth. We have only so many days, hours, minutes. Are we using it all for the full impact and influence that we have in Christ? I hope you're intrigued to go find this movie. Maybe you've seen it before and you just need to watch it again and kind of just in the back of your mind have all these questions sort of going through your mind of what would my world look like if I wasn't in it? That's crazy. That's if the Lord gave you the opportunity to see that, what would be the void left by your presence not being there? Because we all have a value and we are all important. And as God's children working in the kingdom, telling others about Christ, that's the most wonderful thing we can do with our lives. So check it out this Christmas. Let me know your thoughts if you've seen it. If you haven't, if you watch it for the first time, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If I'm crazy about this being the best Christmas movie and one of the greatest movies of all time, you may want to argue with me. That's fine. I won't take it too personally. Love that last scene. Like you got to get through the whole movie just to get to that last scene where little Tommy or one of George's kids is on the piano playing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and the whole town is like gathered there. I'm giving the whole movie away now, but there's this cool moment where I get goosebumps like thinking about it, just like how the movie ends. Anyway, I want to leave you with our theme verse today, Ephesians 5:15-17. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Guys, it really is a wonderful life. We'll see you next time for our last episode of this year. Take care. God bless.
Hey guys, this is Derek Charles Johnson. You have been listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast. I am a blogger, a songwriter, an artist, And if you've been encouraged by this podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and share, and head over to DerekCharlesJohnson.com for more encouraging content. God bless.